No child should have to wonder if their mother left them.
Her sister Nancy vanished without a trace, leaving 2 young girls without a mother.
It's like she disappeared from the face of the earth.
Now, does a confessed killer know more than he's telling?
He just absolutely refused to cooperate in any way.
Is a coworker not telling the truth?
Here you're telling me you did have sex with her.
Did the single mother's surprising sex life lead to her demise?
I had to step back and blink twice. There were sex toys in there, all kinds of them.
Her family had no idea that was going on in her life.
On a freezing cold Friday night in Tenino, Washington, an exhausted Nancy Moyer kicked off the weekend by pouring herself a glass of wine. The single mother of 2 worked full-time for Washington State's Department of Ecology as an accountant, and her young girls were her everything.
When they were real little, she would call and they had to send her home from work because she was crying because she didn't want to be separated.
Since leaving her husband 2 years earlier, her daughter's well-being was Nancy's top priority.
She wanted the kids to have a mother and a father, both, and so she was trying real hard.
And co-parenting seemed to be working well. Nancy had the girls during the week. Bill had them on weekends.
Their main concern was taking care of the kids, keeping the kids' lives as normal and as happy as can be given the circumstances.
With 2 young kids and a full-time job, Nancy's weeks were busy. But on weekends, she was free to live the single life.
She had a few dates here and there that I was aware of.
But one Friday evening, there was no date planned. Tired, Nancy planned to just chill out. And after work, she first dropped off a coworker, then stopped by the grocery store.
It was around 6 p.m. on that Friday. There was a Tenino police officer that I interviewed that was running radar right there at the corner where her house was, and he saw her pull up. And she was alone, and he saw her get the bags out and take them into the house.
But mysteriously, it was the last time anyone has reported seeing Nancy Moyer, though a neighbor believes he heard her later that night.
He heard a car door, and just before the car door closing, she said, "Hurry up, let's get going."
Nancy's neighbor assumed she was talking to her kids and didn't think much about it, until 2 days later, when she was reported missing. So it was a normal Sunday night. Bill Moyer was dropping the kids off at his estranged wife's house. But when he gets to the house, he notices something off.
I never missed a drop-off or pickup, and neither did she. And so this was 100% out of character for her to be missing. And it felt wrong instantly.
Despite the cold outside, Nancy's front door had been left open.
It wasn't unusual. She would walk in the neighborhood sometimes. So I took the kids in, and we waited for a few minutes thinking, oh, she'd come back from a walk. But she didn't.
When Nancy didn't show up, Bill took the girls back to his house and returned a little later.
So we came back again, but I realized that she hadn't taken her purse or her keys or her cell phone. All the normal things you would expect to take with you they're still sitting in the house. I remember a glass of wine was half drank on the table, and just things were kind of in their usual places. It was just like she just vanished.
Right away, Nancy's sister Sharon knew something was wrong.
After being away from them for the weekend, she would never miss meeting them that night to hug them and say hello to them.
Late Sunday night, Bill filed a missing persons report with the police, and the next day, the case was turned over to the Thurston County Sheriff's Department to now retired Detective David Haller.
Where does this case rank on the bizarre nature of it?
Top 5.
Top 5?
Between LA and here, top 5.
That unique?
Very much so.
First up, Detective Haller needed to determine exactly when Nancy disappeared.
From what I was able to find in my investigation, it appeared to me that somewhere around 11:30 or 12 o'clock.
Why do you think that?
It was a really cold time of year. The front door of the house was found open by Bill. I decided to check the utility bill because she had gas heat in the house, and I could see where it spiked.
Detectives didn't find anything missing in the house. There was no sign of forced entry and no evidence that anyone else had even been inside.
We fingerprinted 2 glasses, and her fingerprints were on both those glasses. The hope was, if somebody was in there and having a drink with her or something, that we'd pick up some fingerprints that weren't hers. We didn't find any.
With so few clues in the case, detectives immediately turned their attention to Nancy's estranged husband.
How did you feel when the investigators started to turn their attention to you as a possible person of interest?
I kind of know how it works. I mean, it's statistically, the husband's always a suspect number 1, but also I saw it as an opportunity to clear my name very quickly.
Bill agreed to a polygraph test right away and passed with flying colors.
And did they tell you early on they've eliminated you?
Yeah, they even went on TV and said the husband is not a suspect. Yes.
Cops then turned their gaze on a coworker.
The weekend that she disappeared, he had called and left a message on her phone. So he was, of high interest.
The coworker claims he and Nancy had a date set for that Saturday night.
He was just absolutely infatuated with her, from what he told us.
He says when he arrived, her front door was open, but Nancy was nowhere to be found. He hollered for her, then left. At the time, Detective Haller says the coworker's alibi for Friday night checked out.
And the kid said, yeah, no, Dad was home all that night. He didn't go anywhere.
But when a new detective re-interviewed that same coworker about his relationship with Nancy, he heard a much different story.
When he was interviewed by Detective Howard, he said that he tried to have sex with her, but he couldn't. He couldn't perform. And that she stayed the night, got up, had breakfast with him. When I interviewed him, he had sex. She went home that night. Just totally the opposite.
And that's not the only thing Detective Ben Elkins found suspicious.
I asked this person, if you knew where Nancy Moyer's body was, would you tell me? And this person said, quote, no. I look at him, I'm like, oh, wait a minute here. No, seriously, would you tell me where Nancy Moyer's body was? And he chuckles, no.
And then there is this. When first questioned, the coworker submitted to a polygraph test, but the results were inconclusive. So is he willing to take one now?
We basically said, I don't know.
The coworker has never been named as a suspect or charged in Nancy's disappearance, but Detective Elkins plans to question him again. And he's not the only person cops have in their sights. 8 years after Nancy Moyer disappeared, there's still no trace of the mother of 2.
We call it a no-body homicide because we don't have a body.
No body, but plenty of sex toys have led to new theories.
So basically this new lifestyle of Nancy's could have led to her demise.
Correct, yes.
And unbelievably, frozen meat in her freezer.
There's a darn good possibility he met Nancy and sold her this meat.
Leads to a person of interest. When Nancy Moyer vanished from her Tenino, Washington home, detectives were left with very few clues to work with.
It's like she disappeared from the face of the earth.
Police were never able to find evidence for a murder or develop a suspect in the case, but a gruesome murder in her hometown led to a person of interest.
So this is one, deranged individual.
Oh, absolutely.
The tiny town of Tenino was stunned when a local man selling meat was caught riding around with the dead woman in the passenger seat of his delivery truck. Her body still warm.
This guy came up behind her, hit her in the back of the head with a hammer, dragged her down into the ditch, took a knife to her, tried cutting her head off when she was still alive, killed her, wrapped her up in a sleeping bag, put her in his pickup truck, and started driving down the road.
At first, Bernard Keith Howell denied killing 60-year-old Vonda Boone. He claimed he found her dead on a popular hiking trail and was going to dispose of her body to save her family from the burial costs.
I read too that he had, I don't know how you can say this, basically had sex with the corpse.
Yeah, I think it was more of he used something to have sex with her.
Howell eventually confessed to killing the massage therapist and was sentenced to nearly 30 years in prison. He says he was high on meth at the time. Cops wondered if he could be tied to Nancy's mysterious disappearance.
I did interview him because of the close proximity to Nancy's place.
Not only did the door-to-door meat salesman live less than a mile from her house, there was another possible connection.
Well, in the inventory of Nancy's refrigerator, we found a package of that meat in the freezer, and it was the same company, everything.
So detectives showed photos of the confessed killer to Nancy's 2 daughters.
And one of the daughters, the older one, said she recognized him.
Detective Howler was eager to question Keith about the missing mother.
He just absolutely refused to cooperate in any way. No polygraph, wasn't going to give any statements, denied ever selling her meat, denied ever knowing her. Just, and all of that just kind of run the red flag up even more because I know he was there.
Nancy's family still suspects Howell could be involved.
I certainly haven't ruled him out myself based on the evidence.
Unfortunately, a frustrated Detective Elkins has not been able to bring charges or even re-question the admitted killer, who sits in prison.
I would like to at least talk to him and see if he'll talk to me, and if he does, obviously I want to interview him.
But frozen meat possibly purchased from a confessed killer wasn't the only thing in Nancy Moyer's home that piqued investigators' curiosity about what happened to her.
I opened that up, and I had to step back and blink twice.
Detective Howler was stunned by what he found inside a bag in the closet of the mild-mannered mother of 2.
Yeah, there were sex toys in there, all kinds of gels.
Was Nancy living a wild life now that she was on her own?
That was the information that was shared with me by her sister.
Detectives learned that sex was, in fact, a big reason why Nancy left her husband.
She got married to William Younger. They had kids. So the way Sharon, her sister, had explained it was that Nancy expressed how she wanted to go out and do things that she hadn't done. She was out playing the field. She was out bar hopping. She was out drinking with friends, coworkers from work. When someone's doing that and they're not sharing that with a best friend or a sister, the victimology when it comes to that is very difficult to retrace those steps of who she was associating with, where she was going.
And there is more adding to the mystery. Cops discovered things that indicate Nancy Moyer may have been living in a secret world of sexual fantasy.
I found some other stuff in there that it kind of makes me think that she could have decided to take off and live a life that she's been fantasizing about.
As much as Nancy's family wants to believe she's still alive, it's not something that seems possible to them.
She would never leave her daughters. Her daughters were her world.
One thing everyone agrees on: someone out there knows what happened to Nancy Moyer, and her sister Sharon has this message for that person.
I would just ask them to remember that she was a mother and a daughter and a granddaughter and a sister and a friend. And she doesn't deserve to be forgotten. She deserves to be put to rest. And for her kids to be able to mourn her properly.
Detectives are hoping the person responsible for Nancy's disappearance has bragged to someone about what they've done, and now that person is ready to come forward and help solve this case.